It's remarkable how quickly people decide who you are. They observe a single role you played, one decision you made, or one moment you didn't quite land, and before long it becomes your defining feature. It's not always dramatic, often it's quiet. A subtle shift in tone, a cooling of engagement, a fading of invitations. The world around you doesn't confront you, it just slowly begins to relate to you as though your range has been reduced. You were once a peer, a contributor, a voice worth listening to, but now you're the person who once made that mistake, or who always plays this particular kind of role, or who is good for a specific kind of thing. And because it doesn't happen all at once, you might not notice until much later. You start editing your words in advance. You withdraw your full self from conversations that used to feel safe. You shrink, not out of insecurity, but out of realism. Out of the slow and steady awareness that complexity makes people uncomfortable. So you start offering something simpler. Not because it's who you are, but because it's easier for them. There's a kind of dignity we all want to live with, that will be known in the full texture of our story. But the truth is, most people relate to each other through shorthand. A single experience becomes representative. A narrow slice becomes the whole narrative. You were late once, so you must be disorganized. You led a quiet project, so you must not be a visionary. You worked in a support role, so you must not know how to lead. You're articulate, so you must not be good with technical systems. You made one bad call, so your judgment must always be suspect. These judgments aren't always malicious. In fact, most of them aren't. They're shortcuts. Human attempts to simplify a world that's constantly too much to process. But simplification comes at a cost, and the cost is often borne by the person being reduced. Some people walk away from that kind of misreading with resolve. They double down on their complexity. They prove people wrong. They carve out new paths. Others internalize it. They stop raising their hand. They grow cautious with their contributions. They learn the invisible rules that govern how people are expected to show up, and they adjust accordingly. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. It's not just something that happens to us. It is something we do to others. We misread people all the time. We assign limits based on what we've seen, and what we've seen is usually just the surface. We're busy. We're managing our own stress, our own teams, our own deliverables. So we stop being curious. We take a mental snapshot and assume we've understood someone's full frame. Sometimes we're right. But when we're wrong, we're rarely the ones who pay for it. So what ends up happening is the misread person gets stuck in a box that they didn't ask for. They become the person who has to work twice as hard to be seen for what they've actually done, or worse, for what they're capable of doing, but haven't been given the chance. I've been thinking about the kind of talent that gets buried inside systems that reward predictability. People who've spent their lives crossing lanes, who can move between technical and creative, between strategy and execution, but who are treated like anomalies instead of assets. These are often the people who make others uncomfortable, not because they're threatening, but because they complicate the story. They don't fit the mental templates. They don't stay in their lane. And rather than making room for them, we reduce them. We assign them a primary function and ignore everything else. I wonder what would happen if we resisted that impulse. Allow me to make this argument, not just for the sake of fairness, but for the sake of wisdom. What would shift if we trained ourselves to hold space for people's range, to pause before drawing conclusions, to let others evolve in front of us without needing to remind them of who they used to be? We say we want innovation, creativity, leadership. But these things don't live in predictable roles. They live in people who are constantly evolving, people who can't be summarized in one line, people who might look different in a year than they do now. Not because they're inconsistent, but because they're still becoming. So maybe this isn't just about being misread. Maybe it's about building a culture that doesn't flinch when people change. Maybe it's about paying attention to the ways we shrink others and the ways we've learned to shrink ourselves. Maybe it's about the slow undoing of the belief that we've got people figured out, because the truth is, most of us are only just starting to figure ourselves out. And if we can hold that complexity in ourselves, surely we can begin to hold it for others.